We've been talking about audiobook publishing here for the past few weeks, and we're going to start to wrap things up here with a very interesting alternative known as Lantern Audio. Now, I've covered them before. They actually used to be called Listen Up Audio, and more recently they did a pivot and change to a new name. So the services are pretty much the same, but some of the points that I'm going to need to highlight have had a little bit of a moderate change and such, and some interesting information. Let's go ahead. Let's explore Lantern Audio and today's review of this audiobook publishing platform. Hey, you want to stay up to date in the world of self-publishing? I highly recommend that you subscribe to my email newsletter. Once to twice per week, I curate and distill all the information you need to know so that you can focus on other aspects of your self-publishing business. When you subscribe today, I'll send you my bestseller book launch checklist. Visit dalelinks.com/checklist and join over 3,000 other authors who have trusted me to keep them abreast of all things self-publishing. Again, that's dalelinks.com/checklist. All right, so what is Lantern Audio? Now, they're formerly known as Listen Up Audio. Lantern Audio is a full-service audiobook production and distribution service available globally with no apparent regional limitations like ACX, because if you want to do it through Audiobook Creation Exchange, you got to be in the US, UK, Canada, and Ireland. And if you try to play with them and you're outside of those regions, they will freeze or even terminate your account. Why bother? You can go over to something like Lantern Audio and they will work for you. But there's a little bit of an asterisk here. In fact, there's a few asterisks on Lantern Audio. There is a $199 one-time setup fee per audiobook title. So unlike all the other options that we've covered previously, this one's probably going to be a little bit steeper, but hear me out here. Don't tune me out just yet. The nice thing with the $199 is they prep your audiobook for all distributors' formats. So if it's not 100% ready or whatnot, they'll be able to handle all that stuff for you. Now, if there's more post-production type stuff, well, we'll cover that as we kind of get into it. Essentially, they do have a done-for-you service. This is going to vary. The rate is based on the total finished project. Normally I say per finished hour whenever we're hiring narrators, but in this instance they do it based on the actual finished product altogether. Now they offer recording, talent casting, post-production, as I'd mentioned before, music, that's kind of cool, and also podcast production support. Now maybe I should reach out to them, although I don't know about $199 per podcast. But at any rate, the production typically takes about 6 weeks. You retain the rights. They don't have any other rights whatsoever. Now, do you have the recorded content but not sure what to do next? They'll handle it. Now, that part I kind of like. I have all the equipment necessary, but I don't have the know-how and the skills to get it all dialed in so that way it can go to the different avenues. But we'll get into the specs here in just a little bit. Distribution. That's where everybody kind of wants to know, like, okay, where are they sending my audiobook? Now, you have the freedom to choose whether all or none of the options, or you can just pick and choose. If you want to use them for production, you don't have to use the distribution. If you want to use them for the distribution, you can pick and choose where you want while leveraging other options. So that means, like, if you want to use, say, Findaway Voices by Spotify and ACX and Lantern Audio, you could do that. Now, here's the distribution options. It includes Audible, Apple Books, iTunes, Audiobooks.com, Scribd, Nook Audio, Google Play, Playster, Odillo, Downpour, Kobo, Walmart, Libro.fm, Storytel, audiobooksnow.com, which, by the way, every time I see this, it always makes me think audiobooksnow.com, and lanternaudiobooks.com. Now, they also have library distribution, which includes Overdrive, Hoopla, and Findaway. Oh, yes, they still leverage Findaway for Biblioteca, Baker and Taylor, Follett Library Services, and then last but not least, there is Mackin Educational Resources. So there is wide distribution. There is plenty there. And again, you don't have to utilize every single one of those options. So for some reason you do go to one of those other avenues, you can let them know and they'll go ahead and deselect that distribution option. Now, as far as the audiobook specifications, this is where it's pretty much on par with everything. So if you hire Lantern Audio for production, They'll handle all the specs for you. You don't even have to worry about any of that stuff. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same specs as what you get through Audiobook Creation Exchange. I always kind of tell people, like, if you can get your audiobooks dialed into the specifications for ACX, you'll be able to publish your audiobook pretty much everywhere. Now, the one difference is the max file length. That means max amount of each chapter can't extend beyond 79 minutes. That's opposed to the 120 minutes that Audiobook Creation Exchange offers. Now, is that a deal breaker? No. If you've got a chapter that's 2 hours long, what are you doing? Get an editor. Get them to chop that thing up. Their cover art also a little bit different, kind of like Findaway. It is 3000 by 3000 pixels at 300 dpi. So you want to have a little bit larger. I can't remember right off the top of my head what it is for ACX, but I believe it's 1500 by 1500, so about half as big. Now, what about royalties? Now, this is where it gets a little bit foggy, a little hazy for me. It is 75% of net profits. In fact, in their words, they said, we give authors a generous split of 75% of cash received, which varies depending on each outlet. From Apple Books, for example, we receive 50% of list price for every sale. I'm going to come back to that 50% in just a second. And from Audible, we receive 25% of every sale. We then pass 75% of those proceeds to the authors. So essentially, they're an aggregate publisher. They're going to have a revenue split with you. They want to have 25%. You take 75%. Now, keep in mind that they've worked out deals for each one of these avenues. And that's where we kind of get a sticking point, because how much is the royalty for each avenue? Don't know. You'll have to contact support. I'd love to see more transparency with these avenues so I can make a more informed decision without having to waste their time and mine by saying, hey, what is all these things? Yeah, I totally understand that there are, Findaway Voices was, as an example, they say they're not allowed to disclose this, but it's inside their agreement. So I imagine if you got signed up with Lantern Audio, they'll probably provide that as soon as you sign some type of an agreement, but I would recommend just reach out to their support and find out. Now, let's go back to Apple Books, because it said 50%. Okay, let's look at the fact that if you distribute to Apple through ACX, that is going to be 25%. So it's 25 to 40% actually. So if you go exclusive, it's going to be 40%. It goes non-exclusive is 25%. But when you go through something like Lantern Audio, you're getting 50%. Now, look over at Findaway Voices as well. Findaway Voices has an agreement for 45%. Now you get 80% of that 45%. As opposed to now, you have 50%, but you collect 80% of that 50%. Or excuse me, 75% of that. You guys are probably getting confused by now. I know what I'm talking about most of the time. You get 75% of that 50% as opposed to Findaway Voices, where it is a 45% and you get 80% of that. So I thought that was kind of cool. So they must be a preferred partner of Apple Books. So that's a big plus. But again, would love to see a little bit more transparency on their behalf, sharing exactly what those percentages will break down to be. And of course, you look at something like library distribution, that's going to be something completely different. Now, the most notable thing here, we got to take pause, is Lantern's audiobook store. They actually have a pretty nice little audiobook storefront. I went and I scrolled through, saw some great titles and things. Now, I'm only theorizing on this one here. Because it is essentially like direct sales and you have that 75-25 split, this could possibly be the best audiobook royalty that you'll get at 75%, because obviously, it's their platform. There's not going to be a percentage pulled from that one, I would assume. And if someone's listening to this from Lantern Audio, please correct me by all means. But that's pretty good. No other audiobook distributor pays that well. Findaway Voices by Spotify used to have a direct sales storefront called Authors Direct that gave 80%, but they got rid of it a while ago when Spotify acquired the company. As they were like, yeah, why do we need this option? Yeah, we kind of liked having that 80%, but here we are. We've got 75% through Lantern. Now, how does Lantern Audio pay? They pay through, this makes me cringe saying it, quarterly payments by check. It doesn't seem like there's PayPal or any other type of options. And it's quarterly. Lantern Audio needs to get together with Lulu. The two of them need to kind of get their heads in the game. Getting paid quarterly is just not acceptable for a lot of authors. It could be a very big deal breaker because it's already tough as it is, having to wait usually 60 to 90 days for a royalty payment. Now you're saying I got to wait even longer for that. And here's the thing is it is a minimum payment threshold of $50. Okay. That's not terrible. I mean, it's not the end of the world. Hopefully you should be able to make that within a quarter. But if you don't make it within a quarter, obviously it's going to roll over to the next quarter and you're just kind of out having your own earnings. Now, there are some other notable items. You can get giveaway codes for review gathering. Where do those giveaway codes go? Don't know. Again, there's probably some transparency things that they probably should kind of iron out, but considering that they just pivoted not too long ago, I imagine that's probably wise. They probably haven't had enough people asking them questions. A good friend and former guest here of this channel, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, actually uses Lantern Audio, and I've actually bought a couple of his books before, and they're really good. Good audiobook production. He has an excellent narrator. It's nice and clean. It's well produced. Really kind of like it. Now, his books were fiction books. I haven't listened to any of his nonfiction books if they are available, but I do recall him mentioning that he'd worked with Lantern Audio in one of his publications. Boy, this one's going to be an absolutely short episode because, believe it or not, that's all the information I can kind of curate and share with you. And speaking of curating and sharing things with you, make sure you subscribe to my email newsletter today and get my bestseller book launch checklist as a little gift to you. Visit dalelinks.com/checklist and join over 3,000 other authors who have trusted me to keep them abreast of all things self-publishing. I try not to flood your inbox. You know, I do it once, maybe twice. There's a rare occasion of 3 times, but I only try to tell you guys what you need to know when you need it, so that way you're informed. You can keep working on your self-publishing business rather than having to pop into forums or do a Google search of things and such. I just keep you all updated. So again, that's dalelinks.com/checklist. Here are my final thoughts. Lantern Audio seems to be a great option for authors looking for alternatives to ACX, Authors Republic, and more. They actually come with an excellent rating and are partners of the Alliance of Independent Authors. If you go over to their watchdog list, you'll be able to get more details about that at dalelinks.com/watchdog. Just as a heads up, I've said this in previous podcasts before, but the Alliance of Independent Authors watchdog list is a very guarded list of sorts. It's run by indie authors for indie authors, and they try to make sure that anybody that they're rating is abiding by their code of ethics. And if they're not, they will judge them accordingly. And so it looks like they are an excellent partner. So I think you're in good hands with Lantern Audio. Again, that's dalelinks.com/watchdog. I'm eager to hear more about Lantern Audio if you used them before. Let me know in my Discord community when you visit dalelinks.com/discord. Sadly, with the $199 setup fee, it's probably not in the cards for me. It's just not my thing. I'm not willing to throw $199 down to get additional distribution. I do like the 75% royalty that you would get through their storefront, but is it worth the $199? Not so sure. Also, it'd be nice to have more details about the individual royalties per avenue, but this is on par, of course, with most audiobook publishing platforms. You typically have to contact support or sign in to get the full breakdown. Is this a deal breaker for me? No, I'm sure it's like most other platforms. You know, you probably get signed up, they send you an agreement, and you'll probably be able to get the full breakdown. For now, I haven't signed up for an account because at this point, again, the $199, it's kind of one of those instances I'm not going to waste their time, and I'm sure they don't want me to to do that. Hey, speaking of wasting time, we're not going to waste any more time. I want to let you know that next week is going to be the end of this publishing audiobooks series that I've been doing here on the podcast. In fact, it's going to be a little bit longer of a podcast recording. You want to make sure that you stay tuned because we're going to be talking about publishing audiobooks with ACX alternatives worth considering in 2024. There are many other platforms that actually do it. So places like, say, Publish Drive, is a great example that they distribute ebooks and print books as well as audiobooks. That is just one of the many ACX alternatives we're going to be discussing in next week's podcast. So make sure that you stay tuned. Till later, this has been Self-Publishing with Dale, and I thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you then.